Welcome, and a very warm hello to all our new subscribers. Thank you for joining us on what is proving to be a rather epic journey. Just over 4 months ago, we acquired a rather tired but thoroughly dignified 1894 country house from none other than the Duchy of Cornwall, with Prince William himself at the very top of the paperwork. The house, while noble in its bones, had been robbed of much of its original character over the years and in places maintained with all the care of a wet sponge. Our mission? To strip away the layers of hasty fixes and well-meaning but questionable choices to take this old beauty right back to her bare bones, and then, with patience, skill, and a fair dose of stubbornness, to rebuild her properly, using craftsmanship and care that will see her stand proudly for another century or more. Along the way, we'll unearth forgotten details, restore what time has worn, and perhaps rescue the odd eccentric relic of the past. We'll also share the triumphs, the setbacks, and the peculiar quirks that only a Victorian house in the middle of Dartmoor can offer. So, whether you're here for the history, the DIY, the design, or simply the pleasure of watching us discover what on earth we've taken on, welcome aboard. It's been a busy week here at the house, the sort of week where progress is made but only after a few unexpected detours. Still, we did manage to move forward with the shower room. With a visit from my brother and my eldest nephew, we suddenly found ourselves with a very eager apprentice. He was determined to get stuck into whatever Uncle Watson was working on. So off they went, rather like the 7 dwarfs, walking in formation, one behind the other. Watson in the lead, a timber floor joist balanced on his shoulder. My nephew following close behind, eyes shining, knowing a mission had been set and they were there to achieve it. But before we go any further, let me take you back to the end of our last episode. Watson was upstairs in the shower room, removing some of the rotten floor joists and studwork. I had just nipped into the outside loo, directly beneath the shower room, to inspect the sewage pipework and capture it on film for one last time. I'd been gone no more than 3 minutes when there was an almighty crash. The ceiling above had given way. Landing squarely on the toilet I'd been filming only moments before, one of the joists had completely failed. Fortunately, Watson had 1 foot braced on the original granite foundation wall, so what could have been a very literal long drop, pun entirely intended, was neatly avoided. And then came the part that made us both laugh, or despair. Hidden behind the plasterboard, on one of the upright studs, the builders, or culprits, had actually signed their names and dated the work. I might call them fools, but in the spirit of neighbourly goodwill we'll spare their blushes in case they still live locally and value their anonymity over a pint at the pub. Watson then turned his attention to removing the old shower waste pipe, one of the main culprits behind the rot. With all the grace of a vengeful snake, it swung down and attempted to soak me on the way past. Luckily I was in wellies, but it was a close-run thing. Now, the most worrying discovery from the 2011 renovation was just how badly the shower tray had been supported. If you remember, this is what the room looked like before we started pulling it apart. Perfectly ordinary to the casual eye, but the reality was rather different. One edge of the tray was perched on top of the granite foundation wall, which fair enough is solid enough to outlast most of us. But the opposite side? Absolutely nothing. No joist, no noggins, no real support at all, just a lone sheet of chipboard, not even spanning between joists, about as much support as a deck chair made of meringue. We're fairly certain the only thing stopping the previous tenants from making a surprise visit to the downstairs loo mid-shower was the sealant, clinging on for dear life. And as for the movement in that floor, well, let's just say it was spectacular. Now, onto the more technical side of things, and the changes we need to make before we can rebuild. The joist hanger on the left-hand side of the bathroom, that's the slot in the wall where the end of a floor joist sits, needs to be cleaned out and made perfectly level with the opposite wall. At the moment, the spaces for the joists have been cut into the back of the original granite chimney stack, and they're quite shallow. But if we clean them out properly, we can make sure they're absolutely sturdy, deep enough and strong enough to support the new joists for centuries to come. The ring beams, those white horizontal pieces of timber running along either side of the bathroom and tying the walls together, also need replacing, We'll either swap them out for new timber or for concrete lintels and make them perfectly level. We'll show you each step as we go. On the way back upstairs to where Watson's working, you may notice a slight obstacle. Our first landing has now been officially overtaken by rubble bags. They will eventually be moved, making it possible to get upstairs again without the need to clamber over them like an amateur mountaineer. But for now, this is what we're dealing with. Meanwhile, Watson is busy cutting and pulling out any of the rotten joists, along with any other timber that simply isn't fit to remain, including the old wooden ring beam. As you can see, the ring beam is completely rotten at the far end, precisely where the shower once stood. The culprit? A combination of poor plumbing on the shower itself, and possibly a little help from the chimney's rather inadequate lead work. The result is a textbook example of how quickly things can deteriorate. Within just a few short years, what was once solid timber now resembles something more likely to be brushed off with a soft archaeological paintbrush than relied upon to hold up a bathroom. We then set about freeing the electrics for the downstairs toilet from the joists, always a careful operation. Although, in Watson's case, he decided it was the perfect moment to practice his Cirque du Soleil balancing skills, whilst wielding a saw. Straddling the outer walls of the room, rather than simply standing on a ladder. A true facepalm moment, if ever there was one. Once that performance was over, we turned our attention to the ring beam on the opposite side of the room, which remarkably was in an even worse state than the one you've just seen. Before turning our attention to the ring beam on the opposite side of the room, and remarkably, it was in an even worse state than the one you've just seen. This ring beam has definitely suffered the same fate as the other side, though it looks to be a much older piece of timber. We suspect it's original to 1894, and over the years it's absorbed moisture rising up from the downstairs outside toilet and outer wall. The result is a beam that has turned rather soft along its entire length. It is, in many ways, a lovely piece of timber, a small fragment of the house's original fabric, but sadly it's just too far gone to be repurposed into anything else other than firewood to keep us warm this winter. We are a little bewildered as to why this wasn't replaced back in 2011. With the timber already rotten, there was absolutely nothing solid left to support the brickwork above. And, as you can see, the brickwork itself is also in need of a little TLC, so our next step will be to carefully repoint it, making everything nice and solid once again. At that point, we'll also lose sight of the original Victorian pipework on the far wall, hidden once more as we add studwork and prepare to sheet everything up again, hopefully for another 100 years. Watson quickly capped off the bathroom water supply and marked everything up for future reference, before turning his attention to removing the timbers that had been supported, rather alarmingly, purely by the door frame below. In theory, these boards were holding up everything above, but in practice they weren't actually supported correctly themselves. It just keeps getting better and better. I say that with plenty of humour, of course. Once the old section was removed, Watson set about cleaning up the brick and stonework with his chisel, carefully preparing everything for the next step. There's nothing Watson enjoys more than a good session with a chisel, though I suspect the brickwork enjoys it rather less. Once this was cleared away, Watson could finally focus on installing the concrete lintels to replace the rotten timber ring beams we'd just removed. After a fair amount of thought, a good deal of deliberation, and perhaps a touch of procrastination, he had everything ready, heights checked, tools in place, and could begin filling in the missing sections of brick and granite. The result will be a level, solid foundation on which the bathroom can be rebuilt, this time properly and strong enough to last another century. At this point, you can really see just how much of the supporting wall was missing, and how much needed to be rebuilt. As you can see, Watson now has the concrete lintel positioned so that it bridges the gap from one side of the granite supporting wall to the other, rather more reassuring than its previous arrangement, perched directly on the door frame below. With everything now nice and level, and the ring beam area on the left-hand side prepped and ready for its lintel, Watson moved on to more mortaring along the end wall. He also filled in the old toilet waste pipe opening, bringing that section to a proper finish. At the same time, he ensured we had enough space on the far right-hand side to move the current 100mm waste pipe closer to the wall, which in turn will give us more room in the new bathroom and allow for a much nicer shower space. Now the fun part finally begins. My nephew was absolutely thrilled to be involved, jumping in to prep, sand and paint the new floor joists while Grandad looked on with great approval, and with the weather on our side we took full advantage. With the notches cut and the timber expertly sanded, each beam was painted with bitumastic paint, making sure the ends had as much protection as possible against any future moisture issues that will hopefully never occur. In addition, every beam will also have its own damp-proof course fitted along the underside for an extra layer of defence. Of course, at this point my nephew jumped straight in for his next lesson in building, learning how to handle the tools both safely and precisely. He's absolutely amazing, with a sponge for a brain, every tiny detail absorbed and committed to memory. We honestly cannot wait to see what he chooses to do when he's older. With Uncle Watson holding the damp-proof course in place on the new joist, while my nephew took very precise aim. Rather like clay pigeons shooting out on the moor, every strike clean, and every target hit with precision, the job was very quickly complete. I'm pleased to report that no fingers were harmed or lost in the process, just good skills gained and confidence steadily growing. Joist number 1 was then carefully set in place in the bathroom, with noggins added to lock it securely and provide even more strength and support. These have been glued, drilled, and firmly secured. As you can see, the new joists are tied into the old hardwood joists, which are still in as perfect a condition as the day they were installed back in 1894. And yes, you did hear me correctly. There are in fact some joists in this room that remain absolutely sound. These untouched originals are a reminder of just how well things were built when left alone. The builders of 1894 would be proud, that much is certain. With a few extra screws added, and a little lifting here and there to make sure we were absolutely spot on with our levels, Watson was ready for his number 1 apprentice to step back in and add the last few screws on the opposite side. I'll take a moment here to say, as you follow along with us in the coming episodes, you'll quickly notice that Watson is rather fond of going above and beyond. He makes absolutely certain that everything is glued, nailed, and secured so thoroughly that nothing could possibly come apart without considerable effort. It's his way of ensuring every detail is not only up to code, but better than code, always over-engineered in the best possible way. Now on to the fun part for me. With the skeleton of the bathroom almost complete, it's time to bring the design to life. I won't reveal every fitting just yet, but I can share the 2 directions I'm considering. The first is an Indian summer scheme, inspired by the yellow poppies outside the window and the warmth of late sunshine. This would layer yellow ochres, soft linens and toffee tones with accents of pink, bringing a light and uplifting feel to the room. The second is a more elegant and moody approach, drawing from one of my favourite restaurants in New York, La Merciere. Deep oolong blue walls, a mural-style print and copper and toffee accents would set the tone, lifted with touches of denim or duck egg blue. I even have a graham and brown wallpaper I nearly used in our last house. Its blue colourway has all the shades I can see working here. And while I may design a bespoke paper for this room, if I don't, I'll certainly be creating custom wallpapers for other spaces in the house as we go. One decision, however, is already made. We'll use hand-pressed white herringbone tiles in the shower and midway up the walls. White tiles give a bathroom timeless sophistication, providing the perfect base for any colour or pattern layered over them. Should I embrace the darker La Merciere palette, the contrast against crisp white herringbone will be both striking and enduring. These are some of the beautiful tiles I recently received from Claybrook. They're not all destined for this bathroom, but for different areas around the house. One in particular I wanted to see was their handmade terracotta hexagon. Each piece is slightly different, and that individuality is exactly what I love about them. They also offer reclaimed terracotta tiles sourced from buildings in Serbia, full of history and character. I'm not yet certain where they'll find their place. but I have a feeling they could be perfect for my studio in time. More tile samples are on their way, and once they arrive, we'll make our final selection for this bathroom. I'll be sharing them with you as they come in, and I'd love to know which ones you think would work best. Let me know your favourites in the comments below. Meanwhile, in the garden that afternoon, our friendly Pheasant, still awaiting a suitable name, took a very casual stroll across the driveway and down onto the main lawn, basking in the late sun. Then came a true afternoon treat. The young stag who often visits our garden appeared once more, pausing for a leisurely graze on the moorland grass, while we quietly watched from the window. The weekend drew to a close with yet another incredible sunset over the heart of Dartmoor, the perfect reminder of why we fell in love with this place. We look forward to seeing you next week as we begin planning for winter's arrival. There's plenty to do before the cold sets in, from harvesting firewood to preparing for the installation of some sort of heating system, so that with a little luck, we might finally be warm in the main house this winter whilst we continue with the renovations. Until then, thank you for joining us here on Dartmoor, and we'll see you very soon.